rot. It's a plot. We're the Wickersham Brothers, we're onto your plot, pretending you're talking to who's who are not. It's a deep, dark, evil political plot, pretending to talk to who's who are not. We're the Wickersham Brothers, we're vigilant spotters, hot shot rotters and plotters and plotters, and we're gonna save our sons and our daughters from you. You're a dastardly, shastardly schnook, trying to brainwash our brains with this gobbledygook. You're trying to cheddar our morale. You're trying to stir up discontent and seize the reins of government. You're trying to throw sand in our eyes. You're trying to kill free enterprise and raise the cost of figs and dates and wreck our compound interest and shut our schools and steal our tools and even change our football rules. But thank goodness we're no fools. We're the Wickersham Brothers, we know your type, and we're putting a stop to this tribulous tribe. The Wickersham Brothers, we're squatting your plot. There'll be no more talking to who's who are not. There'll be no more talking to who's who are not. There'll be no more talking to who's who are not. There'll be no more talking to who's who are not. Welcome to Close Listening. I'm your host, Zach Morgenstern. That was my attempt to learn one of the more horrifying songs of my childhood, a song from Dr. Seuss animated adaptation of Horton Hears a Who, not the 3D animation from quite recently, but the 2D animation from the 70s, both terrifying and a true classic, and apparently some commentary on McCarthyism and some deeper allegory going on there. Anyway, why am I singing a Dr. Seuss song for you all? Well, it came up tangentially in the conversation I had with today's guest, Mike Preciado, also known as the Lookup Movement. So I have on Mike as one of my poetry guests. Mike writes these short, snappy poems, often with an inspirational message. And like a lot of great poets, with him it's not just a matter of listening to the art, it's talking about the art, it's questioning where it comes from. The whole process of just talking about it is a real joy. So I hope you share the joy I get from listening to Mike's poetry by listening to my interview with him. Here he is. I'm joined by Mike Preciado. You go by Lookup Movement. I feel this is a trend I'm finding in people I'm meeting. Aria Anthurjanimo, a poet I talked to a few weeks ago, just goes by Teeny Tiny Fables. I talked to a singer named Chelsea Spear who went by Travels with Brindle. You know, these various stage names that aren't quite stage names, it's one person talking as if they're a collective or an object. What makes you the Lookup Movement?
Well, you know what, to be honest, it's mostly that title right there is mostly me talking to myself and telling myself to look up. I started poetry right as the coronavirus kind of started. And it really helped me to get past like a depression that I was kind of in, and I'm sure everyone was in. It was a troubling time. We were all trying to find our way. And I found that I was telling myself like, hey, stop looking down and looking at the nonsense and all the brutality of the world, and look up and try to find some beauty in nature. I love nature. So look up and see the clouds or the trees or anything, just see the beauty that is in life. So that is kind of why I'm called Lookup Movement. And as far as me being a single person kind of backing a movement, I'm trying to build a group of people, a collective. I've never really found my tribe, to be honest. I have friends throughout time, but I've never really found like my group of weirdos, my misfits, you know? So I'm trying to build a movement with other people, with other artists, with other creatives. So that's kind of where I got the purpose for that name.
Right. And so that speaks to a question I'm going to get to in a little bit. But I always end up asking poets. On the one hand, I have you do these interviews because I feel like poetry and singer-songwriting, they're cousin arts. You know, the music I'm into is primarily about lyrics. And there are some lyricists, Bob Dylan, Joni Mitchell, Leonard Cohen, whose lyric comes so close to a poetic format, they might as well be the same thing. At the same time, music
perhaps the most mainstream art form, I guess, because it's the most digestible. Poetry these days is a bit more niche. So what led you to embrace it? Was poetry something you always liked? Talk about the choice to become a poet.
Yeah. To be honest, I started off, it's kind of like a journal in a way. I came home one day from a really frustrating day, and I sat down with a book, and I was like, what happens here if I just start writing? What happens here if I just start writing what's on my mind, and whatever comes out, I let it be on the page and let it come out. And I found that it was very like therapeutic. So I really enjoyed it, and it kind of came naturally. In all honesty, I wish I could be a part of every creative venture. I want to do music in the future. It just takes a lot more time and effort. To like you know, the guitar, I'm sure it took years and years. But poetry is very like entry level. All you need is a pen and some paper, and really just get to work. Write what comes to your mind. Be forgiving. In my experience, be forgiving about what comes out. You can always scratch a line out and do something new. But speaking of music, I actually take a lot of inspiration from music. Those artists you were talking about, Bob Dylan, Jimi Hendrix, things like this, and a lot of rappers too. A lot of my flows, if you go through my poetry, it's kind of different, but it follows, to me at least, like a rap beat. Sometimes you're really kind of chasing from one rhyme to the next and trying to find the rhythm and flow, the musicality of it. So I kind of try to blend them all together. But to answer your question simply, it's just kind of like it's in a more entry level thing. Poetry. You can kind of do it with minimal things, and so I plan on venturing out to other fields. But this is kind of just a great way to start and find your creative voice, in my opinion.
Right. Well, the rap comparison, it really struck me in one of your poems, because it's called something like Mike P, and it's like you're doing one of these on the street, let me introduce myself rap tracks. I mean, and that one struck with me because I just always like in singer songwriters when I find the song where they're really talking about themselves and telling their personal story. So one of the lesser known Cat Stevens songs is called I Never Wanted to Be a Star. And it's this great combination of experimental synths with him sort of talking about how he hated stardom right before he quit it. Yeah. So yeah, what was like writing that Mike P poem? What do you want people to get out of it?
Mike P. Well, you know what? It's like it's a very non-descriptive poem about me. It's very like the basics, which I kind of like. You know, in my poetry, my theme is simple words with meaning. So I didn't give too much to you. There's a lot more to me, but I want you to see a little bit of me. But it's kind of just like you said, it's one of those rap things where you go out there and you're like, I'm the dude, I'm the man. This is who I am. I was never really good at representing myself in that light, to go out and try to express myself in that way. I've always been kind of humble. So that one honestly was a little hard to write. But I really want you to just, it kind of gives you a little piece of me, to be honest. And that's kind of all I can really say about that. I'm just like, that one is like a one-off. I don't really write about who I am. Like, kind of in a way, the symbolism behind in all my words, you can see who I am, but I never really am like, this is who I am. This is what I do. So that one's kind of rare. So appreciate that one, because there's not going to be many of those, to be honest.
Right. Well, I guess what we can say about your style that does come out in that one and comes out in most of the others, your poems, they're generally short, and they rhyme, but they rhyme in such a way where they flow off your tongue really well. They're great for being read out loud. Were you taking inspiration from particular poets at all in how you write?
You know, I grew up in limited experience as far as like poetry goes, but I do remember Shel Silverstein. Sorry,
Yes.
I'm having a little trippy tongue here. And then, of course, one of my biggest influences is Dr. Seuss. I absolutely love Dr. Seuss, the simplicity of it, but the friendliness of it, and the fact that you just said like there's a rhythm to the words. It's fun to say. I really gravitate towards that from Dr. Seuss. When reading his books, I not only was learning something, but I was having a lot of fun just saying the words out loud, like in a cadence. It was just really inspiring to me. And so I took that and really brought it into my work. I want you to, I want you to feel something. I want you to see something, but I also want you to have fun in the rhythm and the words, you know, and the beats and stuff. So that's really my biggest inspirations right there as far as poetry. And then I take everything from life. As you can kind of, if you go through my poetry, there's different themes, but I grab from every perspective of life. I feel that you can be inspired by anything. So that's what's great about poetry. You can write about anything and anything that comes to mind. But yeah, those are my inspirations.
So it's funny you mentioned Dr. Seuss. I've been consciously trying to just go back and read favorite children's books lately. And what I appreciate them about them as an artist is because they're short, the idea is very contained, and because often it's the writer doing the pictures themselves. It's like a nicely packaged version of one person's artistic imagination. And when you talk about things being entry level, I've wanted to make movies for a long while, but that requires a huge team, a lot of money. So my recent ambition has been to make a picture book because, well, of course, that requires plenty of skill. It doesn't require a movie level budget. That all said, are there any Dr. Seuss books that you still like now revisiting that you think are maybe even more interesting as an adult than as a child?
Yeah, you know what, man? When I think of Dr. Seuss, I cannot escape the line, one fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish. Whenever I think of Dr. Seuss, that's what comes into my head first. So that book, of course, Horton Hears a Who. I remember learning about equality, about not dependent on size and stature and things like that. So there's these really big concepts that he's tackling in these child books. And I don't think I realized until later on in adulthood that they actually taught me the kind of like the foundation, those important lessons. So like red fish, blue fish, Horton Hears a Who. There's so many more that I can't think of at the moment. But I love whenever I go to like a library or something, there's always a Dr. Seuss section, and I'll just go and flip through and grab one. I think they're all great, to be honest. But yeah, that line, one fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish, for whatever reason, that's stuck with me forever and ever on loop. So that's definitely the one that I carry with me.
So for me, the weird thing, I actually remember just finding Horton borderline terrifying as a kid. And it may be more because I had the animated movie version than the book. So the singing monkeys and the kangaroo that says, you know, we're going to put you in a cage and tie you up. Like, it's a great simplification of how horrifying the prison system can be. And then I guess I used it in a amateur movie I made. I just clipped that scene directly because I just thought it was so wonderfully terrifying.
That's cool.
So speaking of terrifying, lots of your poems, you say, are about bringing people together, but you wrote one poem which is about being alone and specifically experiencing death, called Tick and Talk. Tell us about that one.
That one, you know what, I was inspired by, I have an old an aunt, and we used to stay at her house during the holiday season, and she had this old grandfather clock, and you'd hear it tick, 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 and every hour it let off this chime. And for some reason that drew me to thinking about my heart. Like if my heart was ticking and talking, and in that chime, you know, that old grandfather clock chime, you could almost replace that as like a death sound. It's like kind of haunting in a way, at least for me, as in childhood. It was beautiful but haunting because it always came on in the late hours. So it made me think about death. And I've always kind of played around with the idea of death, what happens afterwards, because it really affects how you should live your life today. So if you believe a certain thing that's going to happen to you in the future, it might affect the way that you're going to live today. And in my experience, I've really found that in that idea, that poem, it really dives into the idea of you creating your own heaven and hell. Not so much that there's a higher being that's going to judge you, because who can judge you better than yourself? So I really loved that theme. And I kind of just like talking about death, to be honest. It's just the ultimate mystery, what we haven't figured out, what we haven't solved. So I really like that one. I'm actually going to read that one today. It's really cool that you
Oh,
brought that
amazing.
up. Yeah, it's one of my favorites. So yeah, I was really inspired by that grandfather clock, and that kind of just took me to where it was, and it kind of just flowed out of me. Honestly, a lot of my poems. I hope you don't mind if I'm long-winded, by the way.
Oh no, please.
Okay. A lot of my poems, there's a starting point where it be a line or a simple idea. And as I write, it's no longer my brain thinking of these things. They just kind of like flow out of me. It just happens. It's weird. It's like I'm grabbing words from another dimension or out of the air. It's an idea that is all around and everyone can grab it, but I'm just there at the particular moment, able to grab it and put it down on the paper. And a lot of times I'll write it and I'll read it there and I'm like, oh, this is crap. This is not a good poem. But if I put it away and come back to it later, I actually find that I'm like, wow, there's some profound lines in this. And it just kind of like, I was inspired by the moment. I don't know how I got these lines, but that's where a lot of my inspiration comes from to write pieces. It just kind of starts somewhere and it goes down a path and I just follow it. So that's kind of how that poem came to be about. But one of my absolute favorites. I love it, and I love that you brought it up. That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there is so much there. And one of the things you're making me appreciate in this conversation, we think about growing up as losing things, as losing innocence, but you're making me think of all these things that I found terrifying as a child that now I no longer do. So my grandparents had this beautiful grandfather clock, and I felt compelled to like race up the stairs every time it chimed because I felt like the big chimes were coming out to kill me. There's also this like English children's song about a grandfather clock that stopped working the day someone's grandfather died. There's all this terrifying children's media out there that as an adult I can just be like, oh, that's kind of cool, but as a kid it's just genuinely terrifying.
Haunting. Yeah, I understand that for sure.
Yeah, did you knew that song, I'm guessing from your reaction?
Yes, I did. Now that you bring it up, my brain is so weird. I can't bring things up unless I hear, like, if I hear someone else say it, I'm like, oh my God, yes, that's it. But I do remember that. And I remember that poem, that song. And it really like, it brought up into my head right now, the idea of time, right? Clocks and time. We all are ticking talks. We have a certain amount of time that we have on this planet. Yeah, just a random thought popped into my head.
Sure, yeah. But I guess what I'm getting at is when you're a kid and you can't put things like neatly into words like that, then they're just all these sort of dark, haunting images. I remember even being in Starbucks, something about the smell of coffee made me think of death as a kid, which it doesn't now. So let's go back to talking about this movement you've started. You do this series called Poetry Corner, and if, as I understand, you look up other people's art on Instagram, photographs, paintings, and then you write your own poetry based off of that. So do you connect with those people? Do you think most of them have seen your videos? Do they know you're doing this, or is it this sort of imagined connection?
It's honestly imagined. I just kind of go off randomly. I wake up on a Sunday morning and I scroll through my feed and I see what catches my eyeball. I'm really trying to grab the inspiration as it comes to me. So when I see a piece, maybe I look at a piece and I see a line that comes into my head and okay, here we go. Let's go for it. Let's roll. I really am into the idea of, I'm hoping that I'm not, I fear this, that I'm offending some people maybe by using their art. I always give credit and I never try to take credit for any of the works that I publish. I always say, this is who did it. Please go check them out. I'm not trying to grab any fame from them. I'm just trying to show that I'm inspired, and I can be inspired by, like I said earlier, life, and other people's art, other creatives. I think that we should be able to be inspired by one another's art and make our own art based on what we are inspired by. So I hope in that sense, I'm not hurting anyone's feelings.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. So whenever I make my CDs. I'll release an almost complete version online, but then I'll make a version, a hard copy just for myself, and it'll have cover songs on it. And it's just because it just going through the whole IP law of getting things licensed, especially when I'm not going to make any money off of myself, it just feels absurd. But in my heart, I feel like I'm not stealing at all. I'm just resharing and re-celebrating someone else's art. And I wish the law wasn't just so much about protecting property, and so many artists didn't feel they had to think that way.
I do agree. It's something I've struggled with the whole time. Like you said, you're not making any profits. I'm not making any profits. I'm not trying to sell anything. If anything, I'm trying to sell an idea, a connection, a community, you know? So eventually in the future, I would like to contact people and have them come on and do their own works and share their own pieces and create a community together. But as far as right now, because I'm so limited on time and funds, it's really just a spur of the moment inspiration thing where I see a piece and I'm like, wow, I have to write about this. Or I see a poem and I'm like, wow, this really connects with me. I have to share this to the world, you know? That's kind of where it is right now.
I do hope some of these people discover your stuff. So lots of the people I've interviewed on the show are people I met directly at open mics. But two people who I just messaged out of the blue that I found on Instagram, there's this guy, Danny Rose, who's an Australian modern Woody Guthrie, and this guy, Archie Noble, who lives in the UK, and he sounds just like one of the Beatles, and he does these like perfectly made covers and also writes original songs that are vaguely in their style. And so these are not famous people, but I feel like I've become their fan, and then they like some of my stuff back. So, you know, it's great when you build those relationships, and I hope you get to do that too, because your series, I think it's a wonderful idea, and I hope some of these people are actually watching and thinking, wow, my art inspired this.
Thank you. You know what, it's not all quiet. I do get some love from some artists, and they really do appreciate it. They say, thank you so much, you know, I appreciate it. And, you know, so I do get some love. It's not all silence, which is great. Like you said, I love connecting with those people and building those relationships. I find that there's a lot of people outside of the mainstream as far as music and art goes that you could really find like hidden gems and a different perspective. I've always appreciated the perspective of the come up, starting from nothing and working your way into something. But for some reason, when people reach the top, their art becomes a little stagnant. There's no challenge anymore. So I really like to follow the people that are coming up and challenging themselves, and maybe they're failing, but they're learning and growing. And that is like just one of the most integral parts of life to me. Because I failed so much. I've you know, I'm still failing today. But I'm trying, and to see those people that are out there chasing their dreams like you, it's amazing. You know, it's really a spectacular thing that we're going to try to put all of our chips behind ourselves and hope that we can get out there and do it, you know. But I really do love that coming up artist community. And I have to say, your art, man, your music, it always puts a smile on my face. I love it. Joining just another open mic, I was blown away to see you come on to the first time, and I had no idea what to expect. And just the jovial feeling of your music, man, it really puts me in high spirits. It really does. And I can see that you really truly enjoy writing and you have fun doing it, and it translates through your music, and then it translates to me and it carries me through my day. It really does. So you're in that group of people that are coming up that I really, really like.
That's amazing. No, thank you. And I mean, the feelings are reciprocal. So at this point, I'd like to invite you to share a poem with us.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. I have 3 if you don't mind. They're just
absolutely, yeah. Poets have free reign to do a few more.
Okay, so this is my first poem, written in 2019. Head pounding, people clowning. How much can I take? How long can I fake this smile? That's just not my style. Let me be free. Sorry, let me be, set me free. Alone is where I want to be. Look to the sky and feel the breeze. freedom amongst the clouds, always peaceful, never loud, floating through, nothing to do but live. I have nothing to give, but I'll sit here with you in silence, all around us violence, you and me as free as we can be. So that was my first poem. That day where I came home and I just had a hard day and I needed to just get it off my chest. And it actually brings back a little bit of that to me now today. But that's where it all started. Just getting something off my chest, and that can be the starting point for anybody. It's really, really cool. Let me go ahead and get into my second poem here. Okay, this one is titled Imagine, actually inspired by John Lennon's Imagine. Imagine you wake up tomorrow, you go to your neighbors for a cup of sugar to borrow, only to find it's you standing in the doorway. You're stuck, unsure of what to say. Everyone in this world is now you. You say, I must be dreaming. This can't be true. This world suddenly looks very different. Everyone except you cannot see the difference. What is this world like? Are the people nice? Is it safe at night? How different is mankind? A true representation of the golden rule. In this world, the way you treat others is the way they treat you. Now, if this world is shit, don't you dare forget that it was you that created it. Now we're gonna move on to the poem you had brought to me before. This is the grandfather clock poem. I feel my heart tick and talk like an old grandfather clock. If my heart should fail, would time stop? Locked in the moment between life and death. You are your own judge, for only you know your deepest regrets. For your sins, you must attest. What kind of life did you lead? Good, bad, somewhere in between? Detached from your human vessel, you are able to wrestle your ego into submission, allowing yourself to see your life in clear vision. Analyze your regrets. What would you do now instead? What words were left unsaid? Relive the good times. First kiss, first cat, first this, first that. Find moments beneficial to mankind. Oh, what a sight. You spread love and positivity starting at birth, before you played in the muck and the dirt, damaging not only your vessel, but your self-worth. What afterlife do you believe you deserve? How will you serve your time infinite? From others' eyes, were you a benefit or detriment? With now clear eyes, you shall design your own afterlife, destined to endure your own final judgment for the rest of time.
No, well, it was great to listen to all those. I like the little moment where you corrected yourself because you didn't deliver the tone right in the first one. You know, there are arts like theater where the absolute rule is don't do that, pretend it didn't happen, but it almost makes the poem stronger that you're saying, okay, I read it this way and here's a better way to read it in that moment. I'm curious what you would say your growth has been all along. One thing I noticed with the first one is obviously a bit more of a unequivocally dark, sad poem. And one thing I've struggled with when I've tried to write poetry is I assume only dark, sad stuff can sound good and everything else sounds corny. I guess you need a confidence to write more happy or even ambivalent poems. But how would you describe your process?
Well, coming up, there was a lot of darkness. I think it always starts with that. A lot of analyzing why the world is the way it is in this dark way, kind of getting out my dark thoughts. So I really started off this first. I have two different books here, if I can show you.
Yeah.
So this is my first book, the green book. This is like the dark book where I got all my demons and all my trials and tribulations. And then this book I have here, my brown book. This is my second book, and you find a lot more love and light. And I'm finally starting to find those small moments of joy, you know, that you might miss if you're not trying to write poetry. I find them and I write about them at the end of the day so that I can keep them with me. But it did start out dark. I think everyone has a lot of angst and depression and things sitting on their shoulders that they need to get out. They need to get off somehow. And I've always kind of been a dark person, so I find a lot of meaning in the struggle. So I actually find a lot of light in the dark in a way. From going from where I started to where I am now, it's a lot more light poems. I'm tackling more grand ideas, and they're not so attached to myself. Maybe they're attached to life, like Death, the one I just read. I might, in my first book, I might write about how I would feel in death. But now I'm really trying to broaden my horizons and bring a perspective that not only I can connect with, but everyone else can connect with. I love to hear people tell me what they see in my art. I read it all the time, so I like it, but I like to see what perspective other people get from it. That is like everything to me. I love it.
And that's the thing I always want to hear, because it assures that, art is not like a hard science where you're being evaluated on getting it right. It's about how you enjoy it, and there are multiple ways to do that. Well, Mike, this has been great. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Zach. I appreciate it. This was really, really smooth. You made it feel like you're a friend, and you are a friend, but this was very friendly and warm and inviting. And I have to say, I love your interview style. I think that you ask very pertinent questions. So I thank you. And this means a lot to me. It really does.
Excellent. Well, I will keep that in the recording.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
So that was my interview with Mike Preciado, and I had a hard time just not going on tangents a lot of the time, and I guess that's a poetic way of thinking. Someone shares an idea, and you say what that idea makes you think of, and I just have to remember my job as an interviewer is to connect things back to the guests. But Mike regularly puts out new work, and you should really check out his show, Poetry Corner, because I think it's a wonderful idea, and I really hope he's getting a good response from those artists he's taking inspiration from, because that's what I'm trying to do with this project, connect different artists, some of whom have bigger platforms, some of whom have smaller platforms, and just give the appreciation to all of our work that we all just so want, because we make work to share it. We make work to get reactions, not to be stars, just for it to be an entity out in the world. So check out Mike's project, check out his poetry, and check out more of what we do here. I'm Zach Morgenstern. This is Ludwig von B. See you next time.